Hey everyone, Christopher Ruocchio here of Sun Eater, back with another, one of these throughout the spiel. To be honest with you, it's been one of those weeks. Glad to see everybody here in the chat. Looks like I got some familiar faces. Hive Tyrant, welcome back. Orion, welcome back. Sam, Sir Galahad, Paul, welcome. I believe it's a new name. Corey, Colby, Paul. Hello everybody. Master Malrubius, I see. Daniel. Hope everybody is having a good June. Doing this a little bit earlier in the month than usual because I have an appointment with the Lands Between on Friday, so I wasn't going to do it next week because then I'd lose a whole night. I could play Elden Ring. So now you know. Now you know why it's earlier in the month. So there we go. Yeah. So what have I been up to? I've been working on a bunch of smaller things. Mentioned this in my update video. I've been doing a bunch of short stories, a bunch of book introductions and things for the various special editions so that I can get everything that isn't book 7 the heck out the way. Waiting on Diamond Edition news. I know a couple people were asking, they asked for updates through the Kickstarter. If you happen to be here, we are not 100% sure on the precise timeline yet. The paper is arriving early July, so it's a question of how quickly they can turn around. After that, the good news is that they are getting the paper for book 2 at the same time, so we won't have to wait for it again. So oh man, Zin went under anesthesia. Hope everything's okay, whatever's going on. But yeah, no, I also cannot believe MJ was using that to sleep. That was rough stuff. Hive Tyrant, I'll start. How did the French Revolution doom the human race? That's bait. That's bait. It was just a bad time, man. Hello from Russia. Hello. Thank you for being here. NZ says, it's my first time catching a Q&A. Just finished this Quiet Gods. Great read. I am so glad that you enjoyed it. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Yeah, it seems like more or less everybody likes this Quiet Gods. There are a few people not so high on it. Let's see. Man, I was wondering if this would be the stream that we got through without mentioning Dune at all. But Sam asks, Christopher said, in many ways your books are written to be in conversation with Dune's philosophy. In what ways do you think you're in conversation with Star Wars? That's an interesting question. And not so much a Dune one. But I think I said this before, but like Star Wars is really like my entrepot into science fiction generally, right? My dad is a Laserdisc player, and so I watched the un-Lucased versions, the original versions. I grew up on those. I like to say that I am like the youngest person, the last person who grew up with sort of the real and the pure before the prequels, before Disney. Certainly before Disney, but before the prequels. I remember Star Wars before Phantom Menace, and I was like a baby, right? Yeah. By the way, if you hear any screaming babies in the background, she's trying to fall asleep. She's not so good at it, and it's it's a process. My wife's got her, but it's she doesn't like sleeping. She doesn't like going to sleep. So it's what made me want to it's what made me a science fiction nerd, basically, right? Because I would watch the original trilogy basically on loop for a long time, Laserdisc, then with the last issue of the VHSs before they went all special edition on us. Yeah, no. So as far as like the actual content, though, I think in a lot of ways, it's sort of anachronistic to think this way, but like you could think of Dune almost as a response to Star Wars, because what Dune is a response really to like John Carter, right? And Star Wars is more playing straight of the kind of story that John Carter is, right? It's sort of straightforwardly moral, at least in the original trilogy, and so on. And so Dune is subverting that, and to the extent that I'm trying to revert and go back to telling a story that is straightforwardly moral but complicated, right? I'm sort of in my own head. This is in no means meant to be like condescending to what Star Wars was. I think what I'm trying to do is tell Star Wars for grown-ups, right? Basically, it's like a really trite way to put it, because like Star Wars is in its original inception great, But that's basically sort of how I think about it. Is like I want to say, like, look, if you grew up with Star Wars, you love Star Wars, like, come on over, right? So that's basically it. Let's see. Man, the chat moved a lot. Let's see. Elise is here. Hey, Elise. Finished Disquiet Gods. Am I going into Shadow of the Erd Tree completely blind, or are you watching all the previews? I am a big like Ratatosker fan, so I watch a lot of his videos. I've seen all of that. I accidentally saw what may be real leaks, but maybe fake leaks. People are like, some of them are real at least. I've seen a couple of bosses that weren't in the official preview coverage that are real, but I've seen some other stuff I'm not so sure about. Some of it I don't really, I'm kind of on the fence about. I won't say anymore, but like, I never go into anything blind, basically. But I'm not gonna like look stuff up that much when I'm playing it. I know a little bit of what's out there, because usually like 10% spoilers makes me more excited, and then if you hit to like 20-25%, then the excitement starts to diminish a little bit. So it's always a fine line to walk. But no, I know a fair bit. I watched like the whole. I watched not the whole, but I watched some of the Red Bull coverage, and which was mostly just agonizing to watch. It was rough. But it gets you all the weapons, so that's cool. No idea, exactly like item wise what's out there. I don't know what my character is gonna look like, but by the time I'm done, but I'm looking forward to it. Will says, hey, Sender is my new fave. I'm from the UK and I've loved your books. Currently in Ashes Man. It's amazing. Well, thank you, Will. I'm very glad. Hello from Indonesia. Thank you, Gamal. Got a sister removed. Well, Manzin, I hope the rest of it goes smoothly. It's rough. Anyone who says Disquiet Gods is bad are people who can't read. Well, thanks, Enzed. I am really, really glad that you liked it so much. Is the reason the Empire's Anthem is what it is because William I was an Ingwe Malmsteen fan? Probably not. Probably somebody just found a copy of the music sheet somewhere and thought it sounded appropriate, because it kind of does. When Hadrian says Lord Washington, did I know Washington argued against Adams against honorifics for the president? Yeah, no, I know that he did. There are two factors at play here. One is Hadrian doesn't know that, right? And so he's imputing his form of government back onto the Murakami. And so when he talks about that, so and then two is it's sort of a feature of translation. And so it's just sort of getting blurred. If Sun Eater ever got a film or TV adaptation, which character would Willem Dafoe play? Like half of them. No, it's too easy to say Sirianni, right? But Sirianni. Go full Goblin once again. What a legend Willem Dafoe is. He's one of my favorite actors, as he should be everybody's favorite actor. He's just a legend. Just finished Disquiet Gods. Started my book of the New Sun Journey. Any tips? The first is just to be patient. Like, a lot of it's not going to make sense. You Book of the New Sun is really a book that you get the second and third time you read it. The first time, just have fun. It's weird and cool, and the setting is bizarre, and there's nothing really like it. And so if stuff's not making sense, just kind of roll with it. And just assume that it does, because it does, and that you will get answers if you pry hard enough. If you're finding though that you're still just not clicking with the book at all, it's okay if it's not your thing, for starters. But then the other thing I would suggest maybe is check out Alsbo Soup, which is a podcast that basically just explains chapter by chapter what is happening. They don't really go into what the text means, right? It's conversations with myth and with other science fiction. It just sort of tells you this is what's happening on a world building plot level, and that is really useful on that first time. Who's depicted on the original cover of Howling Dark? We're talking about the covers that are used on the Russian editions there, and the which is also the U.S. art. That is Karn, the yellow robe, sword, dark cover. That's Karn. Oops, I didn't do that. Sleep training is rough, but it totally works. Yeah, it's a little awkward when you're, live streaming and, people will maybe hear it. I don't know how audible it is. But it's enough that I'm like, oh, I should go. But like, the wife's got it. She took tonight. So, gotta go to work. So, my hours are strange. How did being a father impact my character design for Cassandra? Well, most of book 6 was written before my daughter was born. The only chapter that was written after I really had any sense of what being a father was like is, I think, chapter 5. And so maybe the best way to answer that question is maybe go read chapter 5 again. That might make it clearer. But in writing book 7, it's sort of interesting because Cassandra has a bit more to do, I guess, is maybe the right way to put it. I know there are a few people who are like, "Oh, Cassandra's sort of wasted in book 6," which I don't think is quite fair. She is doing exactly what she's supposed to be doing, but things change later in the series. There's more going on there than I think the people who say that are countenancing. But yeah, no. So only chapter 5 is written after my daughter was born. Most of Disquiet Gods is written substantially earlier. It was just the hiccups with the publishing slowed down its getting out there in a lot of ways. Let's see. Sir Galahad, do I look to weird fiction writers like Howard for inspiration writing short stories? What is the most impressive thing what Howard or Lovecraft do in short fiction? I certainly do. I mean, I sort of look to Howard and Lovecraft kind of like all the time in a lot of ways, right? I'm hoping I can go to Howard's. I'm hoping I can go to Cross Plains when I'm in Texas in September. May not be possible, but we'll see. But as far as like the most impressive thing that they do, or really that any older writer does, C.L. Moore, Lee Brackett, whoever, is tell a whole story, in a huge story in terms of content in so few words. It's almost a lost art. It's certainly an art that I don't really have. My short stories are increasingly tending towards novelette-sized. The Polino story I wrote for the Anderida books, Empire of Silence, is 17,000 words. So is the Genon story for the next Diamond edition. These are almost novellas, really. And I like that format. I like that size. But if you read something like Black Colossus or Tower of the Elephant, like that could be a 150,000 word novel, and it would tell the same story. And so there's an economy there in technique that modern writers just don't have, myself included. I always say I admire writers that I'm not like, and this is one way in which I am not like Lovecraft or Howard or any of those guys. How do I feel knowing that I could power a hydroelectric dam with the amount of readers' tears have been shed reading your series? Man, that's a really good idea. I should build one because power is expensive. So a lot of us are excited to read The Failures by Benjamin Lyer, which I recently blurbed. What is the process for leaving reviews on books entail? Well, usually someone asks, and I was really flattered in this case. Mr. Lyer asked Daw for me to do a blurb, so that was cool. It's the first time someone I didn't know asked me to do a blurb. So either the author asks or the publisher asks, and they give you a copy and you read it, and you either, depending on the amount of time you're given, read the whole book, or you read a few chapters and then you do a blurb from there. You try not to do the Rick Castle thing from Castle, where he puts the book to his forehead and thinks of something and then puts it down. Try not to do that. But often blurbs will be done on partial reads if the timeline is really tight. If you're given like a week to get a blurb turned around or something, which does happen. But that's it. Then you go back, and sometimes if you have given a blurb that is not very quotable, right? You might write like twice as much as they'll print, right? They'll say, hey, can you like massage that a little bit so that we could get a 5-word clip out of there in some way that's like useful. But that's about it. It's not super complicated. But the Failures is pretty awesome. You're talking about Elden Ring too. It's if you're a From Software person at all, I think the general feel of those books. And this is something Patrick said too, because Patrick's read it. Is very familiar. I think if you like that stuff, it's like right in that vein. It's very weird fiction in a lot of ways too. I've never read The Nightlands, but I know of The Nightlands by William Hope Hodgson, and it reminded me in its setting of what I know about that book. And so, yeah. Brady, First Life, gave me some writing advice last year, and I've been rolling ever since. Thank you. Hopefully we'll be starting our novels next year. Reading Ruocchio and Tim Powers. Well, I can't fault you for reading Bujold Powers. They are legendary. David asks, are there any more planned novellas, short story compilations? Yes. So I saw Patrick did a reading guide for the series, which was really cool of him. And there were a number of people who were saying, man, it's just a shame that Christopher won't put the short story collections out in print. And this is becoming my when are the hardcovers coming out question, because they are going to be in print, right? The plan is that I'm going to put all of the stories that are in those first 3 Tales of the Sun Eater volumes, and some of the stories that are in 4. 4 is going to get split in half. It's a little confusing, but I'm going to put a huge chunk of the stories in one single volume that will come out probably, if not next year, early 26. And that will be available. We'll probably do that by Kickstarter. It'll probably be comparable to the Diamond editions, but unlimited. We'll be able to print as many as we want. And it'll have about 25 stories in it, including everything in Tales 1, 2, 3. And we'll probably do that in, fancy hardcover and like less fancy hardcover and ebook, and hopefully it'll be then the audio gets made. And so that'll happen. I am going to write a 4th novella after book 7. It will be from Valka's point of view, and it will be set between books 3 and 4. You can pretty much guess what the story is from that. So that'll happen. There will be more novellas in the future, but I don't know what those will be just yet. I'm getting a lot of characters sort of out the way, in a sense, writing these novelettes for the, because it's the other thing, is there will also be more Tales of the Sun Eater ebook collections, because there are stories going in the back of the Diamond editions and in the back of the Andaritive Books editions. There is not a new story in the back of the Broken Binding editions, because the Broken Binding is coming out 3 books at a time, and that's just too fast. Like, if I were to do that, it would probably push book 7 back. And it would push the release of the Broken Binding books back too. So they aren't getting stories because, like, I don't have 2 months to write 3 novelettes. Because I have not been writing as fast as I used to lately, because of being a parent. Although that's getting a little bit easier. But there will be Tales of Sun Eater 4 will be out this year. It is finished, actually. It's with the copy editor. It's just that I can't release it until the stories in it that are in special editions come out in special editions first. So if you missed the Diamond Edition Kickstarter and you're bummed about not being able to read Guns of Pharos, it will be in Tales 4, but it won't be available to anybody except the backers until after the backers get their books, because that's justice. But yeah, there'll be more stuff for sure. And then of course there'll be more books too after book 7. There will be at first standalones in the universe, and eventually there'll be more series in universe. But I'm also going to do other things. I think I'm going to do a bunch of standalones for the immediate future, the next few years, and sort of go broad instead of deep, so to speak. Yeah. Can High Matter swords end up as a Palatine family heirloom? With the sense need to be a knight to wield it? Or officially, yes. If you're like the son of some lord who had one, you're not going to be like in serious trouble for using it. It's just someone who is of lower rank using one that they're going to get in trouble. But no, they do get passed down for sure. But in the same way that, like, if you were not a samurai officially, right, and you wore a katana, right, you could wear wakizashi, but you couldn't wear a katana, and you might get killed for that, right? You're not necessarily going to get killed, but you might get in some trouble if you walk around wearing your dad's sword like you earned the right. What is my favorite movie that's based on World War II? I don't I don't really know. I don't really know. I'm not like a big World War II guy, to be perfectly honest. So I don't watch a ton of World War II movies. The one that like jumped out at me, and it's not favorite because it's like, awesome or something. Like there's a movie called but it is important. There's a movie called Conspiracy. It's got Kenneth Branagh and Stanley Tucci, and it's about the Wannsee Conference when the Nazis decided on the final solution, and it is quite a chilling watch because it's just about a board meeting. Basically, it's just a conversation, and it is it's quite a film, let's say, but it is yeah, it's not a fun watch. It is neither exciting nor uplifting. Shatter of the Earth Tree. What do I think is the next annoying thing equivalent of Rivers of Blood spammers? Man, I don't know yet. But I wouldn't be surprised if it involves like the backhand sword things. We'll see. It'll still be bleed or frenzy. Like that'll be the annoying stuff. It's people like that who make me want to go back to using the Moonveil. Because the Moonveil is great. It is absolutely a weapon for babies, but that's because it's good. Finished King of the Death a couple weeks ago, knowing a certain event in Berserk cued me to how ruthless you're going to be in that book. Yes, yeah, that was definitely a thing. Do the Cielson work out, or do they naturally have abs? Are there fat Cielson? This is about the picture. That's the artist. So I don't know about naturally having abs or not. There could theoretically be fat Cielson, but I don't think they last very long. As obligate carnivores, it's like, it's kind of hard to, they don't have corn syrup keeping them down. The corn syrup and the seed oils haven't gotten to them yet. What is my personal favorite out of the Sun Eater series? Love your books. Well, it depends on like what you mean, because like for me, there's like I have my own internal metrics for like what I think the best book I've written is, which I do think is Disquiet Gods. But my favorite book that I've written is still Howling Dark, because Howling Dark was just like a really smooth, like fun, pleasant working experience for me. That's the book I like learned my outline. It's the book I like perfected my method on. And it just went really, really well. And I didn't have any like big crazy stuff happening in my life that like slowed me down. And I just have really fond feelings for that book. Let's see. How focused am I on critiquing real life political theories and systems versus exploring other areas like metaphysics? I don't really think about it like that at all. I just think about what the scene or the sequence is, and I worry about doing whatever I'm doing in the given moment properly. I try not to be topical in the sense that I try for the books to not be about headlines, which is like super awkward because I wrote King of the Death in 2020 and Ashes of Man in 2020, and the plague stuff was like already in the outline and had been for ages, and so I'm like, oh no, people are gonna think this is about 2020, and it wasn't. It just was like there. And so that's always bad, because like if you write books about whatever's happening now, they're not worth reading tomorrow. Books need to be about sort of general things. And of course, a political philosophy, whether that's monarchism or libertarianism or communism or what have you, is not a momentary thing, right? Those are things that are around in some sense, over time, although some political theories actually do die, right? And get reborn for that matter. But it's okay to talk about those things and not fall into current events-ism. But I try to avoid thinking in sort of contemporary terms at all, because the object is to create another time and another place and other cultures and other peoples. And you can't do that if you're really trying to talk about now. Like every time I'm at a conference, some writers talk about how really science fiction is not about the future, it's about the present. I just like, oh, like you're a bad writer. Okay, cool. Great. You and I are not the same. I hope that makes sense. But as far as like the relationship between talking about politics versus metaphysics or something, it just depends on like what the part of the story is, because ideally you do a story that does as much as possible without breaking itself, right? That's the trick, because you also should do as little as possible to tell your story at the same time. There's a tension between these things. Hadrian is like definitely a tragic character. Life is intrinsically tragic because we all die, and so let's see. This might be a spoiler question. Prime Legacy, without reading your question out loud to spare everybody, let's just say that would be reasonable. That would be reasonable. And just leave it at that. Hey Colby, audiobooks count, man. I do most of my fiction reading by audiobooks. Nothing to be ashamed of there. How is the public education system on the average Sailsing world ship? Good question. Probably not great. Bill Emery's, welcome back. Sam, I have not read Brent Weeks at all, actually. At least thank you. But the haircut, I appreciate that. I went way too long between haircuts this last time. Somebody told me that I should fire my my hairdresser. But the reality is that I had not been in a long time. So have I watched House of the Dragon? Not yet. I've seen season 1. I haven't seen the new episode. I haven't seen the new episode yet. Ooh, missed a question here. What am I planning to do after Sun Eater? Well, more Sun Eater for starters. I'm going to keep doing books in the universe. Eventually, there'll be another series, but not for at least half a decade, let's say, but probably closer to a decade, because I have other things I want to do. I'm going to sort of alternate, I think, between doing a Sun Eater standalone novel and a non-Sun Eater standalone novel for the next few years. I'm going to keep to smaller scale projects, standalone novels, duologies, if they get split into 2 books, we'll see. But as far as exactly what the nature of those projects will be, I don't want to speak on them yet, because I haven't 100% decided. To Bob's sort of corollary question, what my next book? I don't precisely know. It'll probably be a Sun Eater standalone first. I feel a certain need to reassure you all that the universe is not winding down by jumping onto a new project. So it'll probably be Sun Eater standalone, new thing, Sun Eater, new thing, Sun Eater, new thing. But we'll see. I have a lot of ideas. No shortage of those. What would the God Emperor think of the modern Fallen Empire? I think he'd be quite confounded. You have to imagine that the universe, the galaxy, and his time and place was quite a different place. Faster than light travel only just started, for example. There are only a few dozen planets humanity's on, and it was mostly American colonies, and it was just sort of holding together despite Einsteinian special relativity. Very different universe. So I don't think he would believe what things have become. Do I envision a certain actor when picturing Hadrian? Yes, I picture Harry Lloyd, who was Viserys Targaryen in the first season of Game of Thrones. Who I think is awesome. Let's see. The systems of government use tend to stifle technological development. Was that plan considering few tech would require tech devs slower for them to keep up? No, really, this is like a really weird philosophical point. But well, maybe it's not. But we imagine that like all progress essentially is technological. You see people talk about progress in politics in the news, and they basically act like we're all living in a game of Sid Meier's Civilization, and that cultural evolution is linear and forward moving in the same way that technological progress is linear and forward moving, when in reality none of this is, right? Some new inventions actually make things worse. Consider, for example, the microplastics that are in all of us right now. That was not actually a good thing. There's nothing progressive about introducing plastic to everything, it turns out. Right. In the same way, there's not always something new about innovating societal structures, about innovating moral systems, right? The fact that technology is not rapidly advancing all the time is related to this belief of mine. I think Ray Kurzweil is a fool. Frankly, I don't believe in the singularity at all. I see no evidence that it's happening. The world, broadly speaking, with the exception of thinking smaller and faster, broadly resembles the world I was born in. It's not clear to me that technology has greatly advanced in the last 30 years. It's miniaturized and it's improved in its processing power, but the basic shape of human life has not changed very, very, very much. Unless you talk about something like social media, but that is still an acceleration of a trend that was already in place. The technology was already there when I was a kid, and had been, in some form since, when was ARPANET? Right. So the sort of massive explosion of technological innovation you see between like the 1860s and like the 1970s, has slowed down. I see no reason to imagine that it must maintain a breakneck pace all the time. There's this very stupid meme that circulates on the internet all the time, where it says that if, the Roman Empire had not fallen, we'd be on Mars by now. And the Romans were not interested in blue sky research. If they couldn't see an immediate practical application to something, they didn't really do it. It's not clear to me that the Romans would have been capable of massification. The Industrial Revolution only happened in one culture in one place at one time. It's not clear to me that if the factors that generated the Industrial Revolution hadn't all been in exactly the right balance in exactly the right place and time, that we would have had it when we had it, as we had it. The ingredients were there in places around the world sooner, but the spark didn't happen. And so it's not clear to me that these things necessarily must occur. And so the galaxy is broadly stagnant, in part because I don't think the Silent Empire possesses the will to do a lot of this kind of stuff. There are cultures that do, but I also think there's probably a limitation on advancement, period, because we're limited by our humanness to an extent, right? If this is an analogy, but if, say, technological progress required you have the ability to see, polarized light with your own eyes, as opposed to building a tool to do it, we would never achieve that advancement because we are limited in some way. Now we can bootstrap our limitations with machines and have, right, for centuries, for millennia, but there may still be an upper limit to what our minds can apprehend in terms of, one thing or another. I sometimes think about the failure of physicists to come up with a grand unifying theory in cosmology, sort of in terms of there's a medieval legend about Alexander the Great trying to get to heaven on I think it's a griffin, and as he's approaching, a wind blows him down and says, go back, not here, right? And I often wonder if we can't actually reconcile Einstein's frame and quantum theory. Maybe it can't be done by human beings. So maybe there's some sort of limitation we don't understand in ourselves that will prevent technology from going past a certain hypothetical limit. So I just fundamentally reject the idea of constant linear growth. It's clearly not true in something like economics. So why would it be true in science? Just don't believe in it. Any history or love for the Metroid series? Prime 4 looks great. Barely any, to be honest. I've always liked Metroid, but I've never really seriously played it. I played Metroid Prime 2. That was the one we had growing up for some reason, and I liked that. Okay. I remember really struggling with it and not really, but the 2D ones I've never ever played for whatever reason, which is weird. He's a big Nintendo guy, you would think, but that was one that never made it. I may be misremembering Tower of the Elephant. Do I think Gene Wolfe's paying homage to that in the Typhon section of Book of the New Sun? Maybe. I'd have to reread them to see what you were maybe picking at, but vague setup wise, maybe I'd have to look. How would I feel if someone wrote a story inspired by Sun Eater, much like you've been inspired by Dune or Star Wars? Totally fine. Like even if I like thought it was a bad story, I like wouldn't say anything about it. Uh, doo doo doo. Let's see. Have I considered doing a sort of continuation of the Archanaut? Yeah. I actually originally conceived of the Archanaut as a novel, and I may go back and do that. I just that was the only thing that would have worked for the time travel anthology that I was supposed to write a Sun Eater story for. So, uh, Brendan, I couldn't possibly answer that question. I'm sorry. Um, NZ, my use of analogy in writing to depict emotion is something most writers really struggle with. Do you write with a thesaurus beside you or something? I do not. I do not. Hey, Castle Show. I remember that. Yeah, I was. I am a big Nathan Fillion fan, on account of Firefly. So I watched that. My mother was a big fan. Uh, Yeah, Benjamin, I feel like very differently about this. I have like never wanted to play Zelda ever. And so I was like fine with it watching the trailer. I was like, okay, cool. But then they explained the gameplay mechanic with the copy items. And I'm not sure that sounds fun yet. I'm going to get it because it's a Zelda game. And I appreciate them, trying a new thing, but I'm very apprehensive about it. Very apprehensive about it. Um, but like we'll see. Um, does Hadrian have a prototype, for example, a historical figure? Yeah, like lots. In a certain sense, like talking about fictional ones, right? He is my response to Paul Atreides and to Luke Skywalker and to John Carter to an extent. But historically, he's got some Lord Byron and some T.E. Lawrence in him for sure. Frivolous but genuine question. Is the series name just The Sun Eater? Why did I think it was the Sun Eater saga? Can't it be a saga? Sounds so great to my ears. It is just The Sun Eater. It is just The Sun Eater the way that The Lord of the Rings is just The Lord of the Rings. But so if you could say saga, that's fine. I just don't capitalize it. It's not part of the title. When you can capitalize, you do whatever you want, but I don't capitalize it when I say saga. I've called it a saga before or a cycle. So, if I do a Kickstarter, I guess we're talking about the short story omnibus. Can I explain it? Pretend I'm your great grandfather, not a tech guy. Okay, so Kickstarter is a website where you announce that you're doing a project and you are going to take pre-orders for it, essentially, right? In order really to raise funding to get the thing completed. Books are very expensive. Printing even like the 1,000 copies of the special edition of Empire of Silence we did cost tens of thousands of dollars, right? And so it's hard for someone like me to just do that, right? So you have to raise the money in advance. Kickstarter lets you do that by taking pre-orders, basically. So we would put up a pitch, basically, and say, hey, here's the cover, here's what it is, here are the stories that are in it, here's what you're getting. If we raise, X amount of money, then they will go to press, right? If we don't raise that money, then you get your money back, right? Because we failed, right? But if you hit X times 2 money, like maybe we'll add some extra stuff to it. So like the more copies we sell, the more artwork we can put in the book, or like we'll add some other bonus features, or we'll do something else, right? And so the more success the thing has, the bigger the project gets in terms of quality and scope and things like that. So you'd be able to place a pre-order basically through this website instead of through something like Amazon or BarnesandNoble.com instead. And I would do all the design work on the book and everything, and then we would get that done and we would send it to you, and you'd get whatever it is you backed. And there are like different levels of what you can order. You can order, it depends on how the project is set up, but you could order say like the book, or you can say I want the deluxe version of the book, or I want, these are all hypotheticals, right? I want the deluxe version of the book and I want a poster or something, right? There are different packages you can put together. Hopefully that makes sense. I recently saw a performance of Mahler's Eighth Symphony in Bulgakov's Master and Margarita, both of which with their Faustian and religious themes. Melodrama sounded right up Hadrian's alley. Yes. Yeah, of course, 100%. That's why his last name is Marlowe. just joined, just curious, since you're coming to the end of Sun Eater, do you have anything new cooking for a future series? I am not doing a series next. It's going to be standalone novels for a few years. I am exhausted doing this giant series, and so I'm going to do smaller stuff while my children are very small, and then once things sort of level off a little bit, I will look to doing another series, whether that's in universe or not. So, let's see. I know you don't read while you're writing, so when you're finished, is there a series you want to get to? The Wizard Knight by Wolf should be at the top of that list. Yeah, it is. It is on my list. That is like the next Wolf thing. That or Soldier in the Mist is the next Wolf thing I'm going to do. I just, man, it is hard to find time. It's hard to find time to read these days. Who is my favorite character? Alred Kime is objectively the right answer. That is objectively the right answer, but I am wrong. My favorite characters, besides Hadrian, is Lorien. So, what was the thought behind making Sealson people eaters? It's scary. That's about it. Is the name of the Lotharians inspired by the Lotharian Martians from Edgar Rice Burroughs' Barsoom? It is not. It is not. Since I was here last, I read Fall of Hyperion, which with Hyperion is the very best sci-fi I have read. It is really, really great. At least if you like those, try Ilium and Olympus if you've not read them. I think I don't like the Endymion sequels to Hyperion that much, but Ilium and Olympus are really awesome. I'm a classics geek, of course, so they're sort of playing to me, but I think they're tremendous. What is the hardest book I worked on and why? The hardest was Disquiet Gods. There was the publishing pressure with is the book going to be split or not? Is your contract going to be renewed or not? Basically, almost made me quit. I almost went and found another line of work. It was just so demoralizing. And the book was also very, very hard. Chapter 40 took as long to write by itself as the entirety of the Dregs of Empire. And I wrote the Dregs of Empire with a child being born in the middle of production. So, just to give you a sense of how hard Chapter 40 of Disquiet Gods was, how much I agonized over it. Yeah. But after that, it would have been the Kingdoms of Death, Ashes of Man twofer, because that was one book and that got split, which added a bunch of extra work that, I'm glad happened. But at the time, I was not so glad happened. And it was hard even in the first draft because my wife was very ill for a very long time. And so that was not a pleasant process. Really, the only book that has gone very, very smoothly of the main novels has been Howling Dark. The rest of them have all been a pain in some way or other. Demon in White, not so much, but it had its moments too. And this is part of the job, right? It's work, right? This is a thing I think some writers even forget, is that it's like a job, man. Are the Lotharians generally interested in controlling all the human race? I think the right phrase would be replacing all of the human race might be more correct. What element of the books has gotten me in the most trouble, Sam? My money's on the Lotharians. Maybe the thing about people being mad about something in a fiction novel is that it's silly. And so when somebody's like, I can't believe that he would do this thing, I'm like, it's not real. If you are not having a good time reading a book that you're supposed to be reading for fun, you don't have to, man. So when people it bugs me when people are trying to impute some moral evaluation on me because of something I put in a world that I made up. That's a very silly thing for people to do. We just please be grown-ups. All right, this is supposed to be for fun. So I try not to take it very personally when people are like, oh, Christopher is a bad person because he wrote a thing about a world that he made up that I don't like. I just wow, that is very silly. So I don't really care. It does hurt my feelings, despite that though, because I just want people to have a good time. And I've like made it very clear that like anybody who wants to read the books is welcome to, and I don't have a problem with anybody. So, yeah. Anyway, enough about that. Sorry, that was this question. From my understanding, the only way to get the Anderida Special Edition of Empire of Silence is to first buy a copy of The Murdered Sun. Is that right? That is basically correct. Anderida Books basically is a deal. If you get in on their project, you are locked in unless you back out. But you have to get you have to get in. And so we've done Lesser Devil and other stories, Queen of Ashes and other stories, Dregs of Empire and other stories, which they're about to release more of. I don't quite know the timeline on that. If you are in on that, then you are eligible for The Murdered Sun. And if you get The Murdered Sun, then you are eligible for Empire of Silence. If you are interested, I would like just email them. AnderidaBooks@gmail.com. It's on the website. And just ask them and see what's going on, because those are like pretty exclusive. He's like a pretty small publisher. He's doing pretty small print runs. They're not super expensive by the standard of something that's quite that exclusive. It's not like Curious King or something like that. But I looked at those Hyperion books, man. Holy cow. They were amazing, but like $2,500. Not in this millennium. But not that they're not worth it, but man. Incidentally, Jamie Jones, the artist on those, went to the same high school as me, which is kind of awesome. The same art teacher. But obviously it worked better for Jamie Jones than me. Anyway, yeah, so that's the way to do it. You've got to get in on The Murdered Sun, and that will set you up for Empire of Silence, which will set you up for Howling Dark. That way, if you're in, it's great, right? But considering how like sort of narrow your chances are there, I totally get it. As far as special editions, like the broadest chance at, that's clearly Broken Binding. They're printing at least 3,000, and it may be more. So that'll be your best shot. Oh man, Julien, I'm very sorry to say that Bragelonne, the French publisher, has discontinued the series. So there is not a schedule because they don't know if they're going to do 5, 6, and 7, which is pretty devastating for me because I was under the impression they were doing okay over there. Completely blindsided by this. We learned a couple months ago. Very, very sorry to your father. Hopefully things will change. Yeah. Gamal says, is House Marlowe Team Black or Team Green? It's a good question. Probably green, right? Probably green. The show, the show does not make it a morally complicated choice at all. To the extent that, so I haven't watched the new episode yet. I hear there's a dead baby, and I'm kind of not sure I want to watch that for a little while. But it's different when other people are telling stories. When I'm writing a story, it can be as dark as I want. That doesn't bother me. But like when I see something, it's different. But the show does not make it easy or to like the Greens at all. It's like, look, this is so morally ambiguous, except these guys are all monsters, except Aemond, who has done nothing wrong and is awesome. I basically watched the show for Daemon and Aemond. So both, I love Matt Smith. He was my favorite doctor at the time. And so just seeing him in anything, he's so tremendous. Who is my favorite rhetorician? Or rather, who has most influenced you as one yourself? I think that my rhetorical style is mostly informed by Tolkien and Herbert more than Woolf. There are specific things. So I gap conjunctions frequently instead of saying like he punched someone in the face, comma, and ran out the door. I'll say he punched someone in the face, comma, ran out the door. And that's a very Frank Herbert thing to do. And every time I do that, I think of Frank Herbert. That's like a very conscious decision. Likewise, there are a lot of rhetorical flourishes, I think, that are very Tolkien. I can't think of a concrete example off the top of my head. Woolf was a much later influence, which does not mean he's a lesser influence, but I think something like rhetorical style starts to form, or is constantly forming, and so starts to form as soon as you start to seriously write. And I was reading Tolkien and Herbert far sooner, and so I think they're impact has been greater over time. What do I think about AI writers flooding Amazon with all these garbage books? I'm gonna be honest with you. I kind of felt that way when it was mostly humans. Anyway, I'm like pretty obviously a big snob. And like I try to be nice about it, but like most stuff is bad. And like maybe that includes me. I don't know, but like most stuff is bad, and AI is just gonna make that worse. So, I you know, gatekeeping to the extent that what you're doing is like keeping out people because you're mean is not good, but gatekeeping in the sense of what you're doing is trying to maintain quality at a certain level is good. And that's like a very difficult thing to negotiate properly. But to the extent that we have this like complete sort of democratization of art, to the extent that you don't even need to write, that's literally pandemonium, right? That's literally the Tower of Babel falling, and it's just not a good situation. So, yeah, no, I don't. There is something very funny though about science fiction writers for the last century saying, "Oh, the robots may replace manual labor, but they'll never replace creativity," and they have replaced creativity before they've replaced manual labor adequately. So that's funny, and by funny I mean darkly. So, um, do I find first person easier to write than third? No, but I find not being very Hadrian hard. I'm worried about the degree to which Hadrian's voice is just mine at this point. So we'll see. Um, Interesting. You said Howling Dark. It was after that book I had my wife start your series, and she's listened to via audio. Always caught up with your whole oeuvre, and she's a Disquiet Gods now. Well, that is awesome. Well, thank you both. Thank you both. God Emperor novel? No, that will not happen. That will not happen. Stanley, do the homunculi, clones, and Minos ghosts have souls? Or if you don't know, how would the Museum Catholics look at it? Homunculi certainly have souls. Clones certainly have souls. Minos ghosts, on the other hand, no, they are not people. The bodies they take over, the clone bodies they take over, were people before they destroyed them, killed them, basically. But there's a difference between a computer program and a soul. And whatever Urbane is now is not a person. So it is not murder to kill him. Urbane is the worst. And that is probably the Museum Catholic opinion, because that's my opinion as a Catholic. So sorry, that was a question for another commenter. Malignant Characters agrees with me. Dune 2 is Dune 2 not good. Dune 2 not good. That's all I'm going to say about it. I've talked about Dune 2 so much. Not a fan. Not a fan. How much time? Hey, Matt. How much time do I need to take off for planning for my next series after book 7 is finished? So next series, hopefully you won't notice downtime, because I'll be working on standalone novels in the meantime. I'm like already thinking a little bit about them, but I can outline a whole novel in about a month. And the amount of sort of forecast thinking I would need to do about subsequent novels in a series, I don't imagine would take much longer than that again. So I think if I were thinking of another trilogy, I could probably have it ready to go in about 2 months, 3 months, maybe. And I have like the idea part is the hard part, really. Once you have the scaffold down for the outline, once I have the scaffold down for outline, I find it goes quickly. It's just figuring out. It turns out that creating something from nothing is hard. So figuring out whatever your prima materia is the tricky part. So once you have some sort of idea, I did this earlier this week. I had a short story I had to figure out, and like all I knew was it had to be a heist story, because that was the prompt. And so I had to figure out, you have to ask questions like, what are they stealing? Who are they stealing it from? Who are they stealing it for? Why? Is it interesting enough? Is it a science fiction thing enough? Because like so many like modern science fiction and fantasy stories like aren't about science fiction or fantasy. They're just like normal Earth story. Like the plot isn't about a thing that does sci-fi things. It's just like, what if some of the people were green? Like, that's not good enough, right? Like, you need to have like the ring. You need to have, people feel different, and like everything needs to be weird and interesting, and like you have to answer all those questions. But like, that's the hard part, is figuring out like what exactly the idea is. And then once you've got that, like articulating it is very easy, because all you have to do is ask questions about the things you already have, and you grow an outline. So I can put those things together pretty quickly. Is the Solon Empire America or European? It's European. It is European. America is gone. Well, that's an oversimplification. The Solon Empire is also quite Indian in a lot of ways that don't come through because of the translation that we're reading. But they're there if you look at how like some chantry religious practices function. There's some stuff there that you can maybe see. Do I have a sense of how metrics like Goodreads, Amazon correspond to sales? It seems like reviews tend to fall off by about a quarter to half with each new book in a series. That's pretty normal. As far as what the ratio is between overall sales and like Amazon numbers, I don't really, because it also varies. My audience is significantly more and better engaged than a lot of authors' audiences is. We're punching like way above our weight class. Ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for that. And so it's really hard to say. And I don't have good numbers like I used to. When Daw was with Penguin Random House, I could see my sales in real time, the way I can with my indie stuff. But I only have like the broadest sense now. I know that like I've already sold more books this year, and this was true a couple months ago, than I did last year. Like things are moving so much more now. Between Patrick and Daniel and one thing and another, and things have really picked up. So it's hard to know, but you do see usually about a 50% drop between books 1 and book 2. It's more smooth after that. But I think right now on Amazon, I think Empire of Silence has about 3,500 ratings. I think Howling Dark is about 2,000. But then after that, it's Ashes of Man is about 1,000. So over the course of those, it drops a lot more smoothly, because people who stay tend to stay. Certainly after book 3 and something, but you still see drop off. And of course with Disquiet Gods, there's a steeper drop because it's newer, and so yeah. Daniel, I think you're talking about the Hakarani, and maybe one of the things you do in world building is you just leave these doors open so that you can walk through them later when you feel like it. Were the Murakami American? Yes, they were. About your technological progress point, the Mongols still lived intense long after conquering sedentary civilization. They wanted to preserve their culture. The Sultan seemed kind of like that. Yeah, that's like broadly correct. I mean, they still do they're Ulaanbaatar of modern city, but like there are still like large portions of the Mongolian population that live in a way that Genghis Khan might have recognized. And like more power to them. That's cool. Like there's still hunter-gatherer civilizations that, but oh no. Get there in a second. But yeah, no, civilizations make choices, right? And that's part of that's part of it. But then there are also those other factors that we talked about too. There might not be a way, for example, to do faster than light travel at all, right? But within the Sunday universe, maybe there's not a way to do it better than they are. Although maybe there is. So Brendan suggested I ask if I recommend Endymion or further in the Hyperion series. Yeah, they're worth reading once. There's some stuff that's really cool in them. And if you really loved Hyperion as much as you did, you should totally read them. I find the ending pretty unsatisfying. I don't like the way that Dan Simmons handles the church. It's not true to Catholic theology in any serious way. It's cool, but and there's some cool set pieces and things, but he like they introduce new sacraments, and that just like obviously can't happen because the sacraments are all from Christ. They're not. The church can't just invent new sacraments, right? But he adds two, and it wouldn't happen. I find it unbelievable. But they're still like fun books. They're just not as good as the Hyperion books are. It's like a latter Dune problem. God Emperor notwithstanding, the Dune sequels are mostly not that worth reading. Certainly not Heretics or Chapter House. But yeah, no, I do like wholeheartedly endorse Ilium and Olympus. I think they're as good, if not better, than Hyperion. I really love them. Master Melrubius, I don't want to push you for any info, but given the glut of arts coming out, do I have any pieces I'm excited to share? Yeah, the Howling Dark cover for the Diamond Edition is awesome. And I'm very excited. I don't have them yet, but I'm excited about the end papers for that same edition. I love James's work so much. James is just so good. But like all of it, obviously, there's a bunch of stuff for these Broken Binding editions that are really coming together. Renee Eigner and Peng Lu have both been great to work with. They're both so fast. It's amazing. But the way we're doing, we don't know yet which artist. So each artist did a cover. We don't know which one is going to be the default cover on the Broken Binding editions and which will be the reversible cover. But the covers that Peng Lu has done are all a piece. They don't literally tie together, but they're all like very similar stylistically. And so they will make, I think, a pretty profound impression on the shelf in a way that I think people will like. So, here we go. All right. Ben with several questions. First of which is, can I label Octavia Corvo a muscle mommy? I suppose that you could. God help us all. What have I found out that I did not know before about ending a series? Can it be done properly? Do I have a list of classic books I recommend? I don't have a formal list, but like broadly speaking, I just like will advocate for anything that counts as a classic book. You should read it. Anything that's survived 100 years is like probably worth reading once. Anything that survived 500, certainly, 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, you should like read that stuff. Because it's endured, and that means actually that it's endured for a reason. So any of that stuff, yeah. I'm a big fan of like all the Greek tragedies. I think that's pretty obvious. I can't recommend those. Can't recommend those enough. Yeah. So as far as ending a series, I don't think I've encountered any surprises. I like broadly speaking, I'm like Leto II, the God Emperor, not surprised. And so I basically am walking exactly into the situation I thought I was walking into. Everything feels really important. Everything feels very hard. It's complicated, it's difficult, but we're muddling through. I'm eager to get back to it. I need to get all this other stuff out of the way. We'll see. When people left Earth, did they do it together or separately? They left separately. They left in waves over the course of several centuries for different reasons and went to different places. The exact history of that is something I'm a little bit vague on. I haven't sat down and figured out every single Exodus group or flight or where they went, but they colonized the solar system first and a little bit beyond it, slower than light. The Americans were the biggest, especially extra solar colonizers. They set up relativistic flights with frozen embryos and robots to set everything up, and then everybody else kind of followed a little bit more slowly. THX, LBX, not sure I'm supposed to say that, but welcome back. Good to see you. Stanley, would philosophically the Salesons be considered evil? They certainly are by human moral standards. By their own moral standards, no. In an absolute sense, it's a little bit more complicated than that. In ways that I don't think I'm, equipped to handle. at least on a live stream. And so it's a big question. I think the best thing to do there is maybe read the books. Why did the broken binding artist put a 6-pack on the Cielson? Well, because he wanted to. If that will encourage people to be cringe, that's between them and God. I can't stop people from being cringe. Lord knows I've tried. Hey, Christopher, are there any books on writing that influence you on a craft level? Would I ever write nonfiction? I wouldn't say no to writing nonfiction. I have no immediate desire to do so. As far as books that help me on a craft level, no. I don't read, never have read how to write books. I just read books and copied them, right, to learn how to write, basically, which is, of course, what Goodreads will say. But that's because they can't read. As far as writing advice goes, though, one thing I did rely on pretty heavily early on was Michael Stackpole, who wrote the X-Wing books, Rogue Squadron, and has done a bunch of other stuff. Had a podcast called The Secrets that I think is still on his website. That was really, really helpful to me early on. I listened to it. He doesn't do it anymore. It's like 20 years old now, but there's a episode on first chapters in particular that I listened to 5-6 times. And I got to tell him that, which is really cool. Mike's a nice guy. I like him a lot. Sam, I'm not playing your game, but I'm definitely neither kissing nor marrying Voltaire because he's definitely got something. He was a revolutionary. Definitely got something. Skyrim Case, does Christopher, will the introduction short stories for the multiple editions be compiled in a future Tales volume? Maybe. I don't know. It'll be a ways off if they are, because they need to be, the special editions need to have something special, and the intros seem like the fair thing to not put anywhere. So I might do that. I might put them on the website. That might be used for that lore tab that I've never done anything with. But they'll be exclusive to their books for a while. So, which character, if any, would you say resembles the office of the papacy in the Sun Eater books? Institutionally, I mean, the Chantry has a Synarch who is kind of a pope, but might be a figurehead. I don't know. There is still literally a pope. The Museum Catholics still have a successor to St. Peter. Yeah, but that's about it. Dave, you're probably right. Elric sounds pretty cool. I won't lie. His comments on Tolkien have left me very cold. So there are other things to read, but I love all those old Michael Whalen covers. I own the first 2, but I haven't read them. People keep giving them me as gifts because they probably correctly know that I would like them. There's a character in Elden Ring I noticed named Moongrum with an R, and I realized that's Moonglum, and they just LR Japanesed it. And there's an Elric reference in Elden Ring, which I wonder if that's a George Martin thing or if that's a Miyazaki thing, because they're both obviously Western fantasy guys. Because there's also obviously Anor Londo, right, is the City of the Sun, which is a Tolkien thing, but there's Irithyll as well in Dark Souls 3, which is a Minas Ithil thing. So there's some Tolkien there in those games. So, but Moonglum makes an appearance in Elden Ring, which I realized this last time I was playing it. Ryan, Expanse Martians have Texan accents. Any popular niches that have stayed constant across the Solid Empire? Well, there are still French people. They're decidedly French. So that's the first thing that springs to mind. Did I design Hadrian to fit the plot you had in mind for the series, or did Hadrian's character bring about the plot? I think they're too intertwined to say. I think I've said this before. People say oh, I'm a character writer or I'm a plot writer. I don't. I think it's a false dichotomy. I think that those things together, right, make the story. Are the Valyrian steel swords inspiration for high matter? They are not. Did I draw primarily from Star Wars? I mean, primarily, this may be fair. But my thought process with the high matter swords really was to fix the like silly science things about lightsabers that don't make sense, right? Like if you ever swung a flashlight around, you realize you cut your own head off pretty easily because like you need the weight in the sword to really counter things. And so I wanted to. I'm not like a material science guy, so the material science explanation for high matter is like maybe nonsense. There is such a thing as exotic matter, obviously, but like whether any of it can be used the way that high matter is used in the books is totally unlikely. But I was mostly interested in what a blade that needs no force to cut with would look like from a sword fighting perspective. And so I like wanted to seriously sit down and like rethink how a lightsaber works and come up with sort of the fighting style martial art changes that accompany that more than anything else. But Valyrian steel didn't really factor at all. Is there a tension between the Chantry and the Schollias? I like to imagine them in a kind of shadow conflict. Could there be secret Schollias orders doing non-Chantry approved research? It's possible, but the Schollias really are like pretty deeply under the Chantry's thumb in a lot of ways. The Chantry is substantially more powerful. Have I ever seen Babylon 5? I have not. Hope you come to Pages on Coffee in Mount Airy, North Carolina. I would love to. I've been to Mount Airy once before. It was a long time ago. I would love to go back. Do I think future Sunday standalones will be longer than the current novellas? Absolutely. They'll be like proper books for sure. What are the chances there will be a box set when the series is final? Zero at the moment. The books are split between two publishers, and I don't see them collaborating necessarily. So that probably won't happen. I do not have a title for Space Master Chef. I might write a short story. That could be fun. We'll see. In Howling Dark, did Lord Alistair actually get conniptions, or would that be a spoiler? I don't know. Like a lot of people are like constantly asking, like, oh, like what does Alistair think of like this plot development or other? I like never think about that at all. It's like so interesting to me that that's like that's so like common a refrain. I have not thought about Lord Alistair in a long time. I had a chance to see DJ Butler on Friday, but was just too busy. I haven't read anything from him. What do I recommend I read? I recommend preferably sci-fi. But I recommend, sorry, I didn't see that until I started my sentence. My favorite thing that Dave has done is Witchy Eye, which is his fantasy series. Witchy Eye is amazing. Dave is the best world builder alive. Full stop, period. I will not hear any arguments on the subject until someone presents to me a fantasy writer who learns an entire real language so that he can write his characters better. And a hard language. It can't be French. It has to be Ojibwe, which is what Dave learned. Dave is a genius, and Witchy Eye is amazing. But if you want to read a sci-fi thing, I really, really like in The Palace of Shadow and Joy, which is like a Fritz Leiber kind of dying Earth, like far future, Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser kind of buddy cop adventure story. It's like very silly and like kind of weird. It's about these like two like oddball mercenaries like doing odd jobs in this giant like post apocalyptic city. It's super great. But Witchy Eye is that's Dave's magnum opus in a lot of ways. Am I aware? Hey Brent, that the series is gaining traction on Book Talk. I've seen some fairly big creators reading. No, I broadly speaking, like never think about TikTok, so this is mostly news to me. My sister-in-law said that she saw me on a clip on TikTok randomly, which is very strange. But that was about the extent of it. So no, I don't really know anything about what's going on over there. I said before EOS was first being published, there was a list of changes your editor had you make. Are there any of those changes still bug you? Wish you could tweak? Yeah. I mean, like, of all the books, like, the one that I would like really like completely do over again in some way is book one. Just because, in a lot of ways, just because like I'm like 12 years older now, 13 years older than I was when I started it. Like, I'm just a completely different person. And so there were a lot of like things I would do differently with regard to basic world building and stuff, separate from the changes that my editor sort of mandated at the time. But of the changes, I'm not going to be specific about any of it. But like, yeah, there are some things I wish I'd stood my ground on a little bit better. Because it turns out like you can as an author, and I didn't know that was allowed at the time. Machine Lord. Let's see. I appreciate your books. It's first time posting. I'm curious, any Americans who broke off from Machine Lords and their own civilization completely from the Empire? Maybe. One question on the Archanaut. I am getting into all the short stories. The plan is to eventually have all the short stories in some kind of hardcover. That's correct. That will happen. Probably the first thing. That'll be the first thing that happens after book 7. We're getting close. We're getting close. Absolutely love Just Quiet Gods and all of your work. What is my favorite Gene Wolfe book? Earth of the New Sun. Earth of the New Sun is, I know Gene didn't want to write it, and I know a lot of like New Sun purists are like, we don't need this book. I need this book. That book is awesome. But of the like New Sun books, I think the best one is Sword of the Lictor. All my favorite parts of the series are in Sword. Sword is so cool. Followed by Claw. And then of Long Sun, which is of the Long Sun books, man, it's hard to know. Like, really, like most of what I remember about Long Sun is in that first book, because it's just like such a good opening. But and I love Fifth Head of Cerberus. But yeah, Christopher having haters is proof that he's made it. It's what I try to tell myself. I know there are museum Catholics and Hindus. Are there museum Jews, Protestants, and Shinto? Jews and Shinto, yes. Protestants, not so much. There's one church by the point in time of Hadrian's story. There's been a East and West reconciliation, and a lot of the Protestant branches either returned or didn't make it, partly because of the mechanics of how the escape from Earth went. Hey Sean, good to see you, man. Eamon is the GOAT. Yeah, he's great. Ewan Mitchell, also solid Hadrian candidate. He's so good. Man, I missed some of your Star Wars content in the past. Yeah, I like haven't done that much anymore because like it just got to be so bad. Of the main 9 films, the worst one is a tie between 8 and 9. It just depends on my mood. They're both terrible in different ways. 8 is a better film, but it's worse Star Wars. 9 is just garbage. Then 7 because it's nothing. And then probably 2, 1, and then like 3 and 6 are pretty close. The good parts of 6, the Luke parts of 6 are the best Star Wars, period. But Han and Leia really don't do anything in 6. They're just kind of there. It's a structural problem. But it's in the same way that like most of Revenge of the Sith isn't that good. But like the last 30 minutes are like also like S tier Star Wars. And then 4 and then 5. Which is a pretty normie ranking, but that's the correct one. Just Quiet Gods was weird. I loved it. Thank you, Tony. I was going for weird. Do I recommend not taking the thematic elements of my work too seriously? Just fun times to be had. No, I'm saying not to take. I'm saying not to take me so seriously. That's different. different. Let's see. Or not take yourselves so seriously. That might be a better way to put it. Let's see. Here's a question. I wrote a book. 75% of the agents I sent it said wrote me fairly lengthy email back saying the ideas were good, needed editing, and rewritten before consideration. I'm not a creative person. Advice. Well, if what you need is editing, like that is a service that you can pay for. And there are freelance editors who can maybe help you out. So I would consider trying to find a good one. I don't really have advice on how to do that because like I just know editors personally because of like the line of work I was in. But I would consider maybe finding one. If you're getting 75% response rate saying, you know, hey, we like this from agents, that's really good. You maybe are a creative person, actually. But I would consider maybe, you know, talking to just talking to an editor, seeing if you can find one. There are freelance editors you can just hire on the internet, no problem. Recently read Berserk. Was Griffith always destined to fall due to fate, or could he have avoided it, in your opinion? Man, it's like kind of unclear because Berserk's a little bit muddled. All the framing narratives on the part of like Void, right, the opening monologue for the original show at the hand, and all this stuff, right, seems to make it clear that we're talking about a pretty deterministic cosmos in Berserk. But the cut chapter with regard to the idea of evil suggests that that's not true, because it suggests that actually all of the magic is a consequence of human will in the first place. And the fact that Guts routinely defies fate simply by being very mad would suggest that actually Void is wrong, and there isn't actually such a thing as fate, and that it is only believing that there is that is the problem. And so it is unclear. I certainly think, given Miura's last panel, that Griffith may be starting to realize this about himself, and that things didn't have to be this way, given the emotional state that we see Griffith in Miura's last panel, which is as good an ending, you know, as we honestly could have hoped for in a lot of ways. I think that last panel says everything that the rest of the story was going to say, which is really, really something. Yeah. Why do I think Gene Wolfe has a positive angelic depiction of some artificial intelligence in Book of the New Sun? Do I think his being an engineer influenced this? Yeah, I think that's part of it. I have a theory about this, but it's a little bit too bonkers. I think I would need to like sit down and like sketch it out a little bit before I tried to venture speaking extemporaneously about it, because it's gonna make me sound like a complete Charlie Day meme. But I will mull on it and see if I can give you a better answer at some point. J&J says, can I demonstrate the sign of the sun disk? Sure. So we're going to pretend this light above my head is the sun. You make a circle and you put it around the sun. If you do not have a sun nearby, you just raise it, and then you bring it to your head and to your heart and to your lips. You kiss it, and then you go back. That is the sign. Let's see, we got a super chat here. No Nonsense says, Audible listener started a month ago and blasted the series. Thank you. Waiting for the next series. Is the Sun Eater a Son of God story? If so, can you elaborate? I am not 100% sure what you mean. If you mean like, is Hadrian Aslan, the answer is no. But that's sort of the best I could do. Thank you for the $10. Hadrian is certainly not Aslan. Honest question from a recovering pantser struggling to outline. How do you know if the outline is good? It doesn't need to be. The outline just needs to do its job. As long as the outline is producing the words for you at a rate faster than you could be doing without it, it is good enough. The thing about the outline is it only has to be good enough. And same with your first draft, only has to be good enough. Even the finished product has to be just good enough, right? And it's just the question of what constitutes good enough gets a little bit tighter each time, right? But the thing you really need to do is give yourself a break, give yourself a little grace, right? It is a process, and the only bad process is one which does not result in a finished book. So just chill. You got the outline done. If it's getting you through what you need, to get you through, it's good enough. Todd says, order 3 titles from Quail Ridge Books. Thanks again for signing. It's really nice of you. No, thank you, Todd. Thanks for ordering them. I actually have to go. There's another big batch I need to sign that they just had come in. I really appreciate everybody ordering books from there. Which reminds me, if you want to buy a signed copy of any of my books, you can do so at quailridgebooks.com. Just during checkout, just say, hey, I want Christopher to sign my books. There's a comment section during the checkout process. Just fill that out. And if you want the books personalized, just say, hey, I would like to say to, Todd, right? To Stephen, whatever. If you want me to write a quote or something, just please pick a short one, because if some people send me whole paragraphs, and it's just not possible. But I'm happy to do that. I think a link's in the description, but I cannot see the description here in StreamYard. So, so I have not listened to either of the audiobooks. So I don't know. I know that that Samrukan changes pronunciation sometimes. The correct pronunciation is Syriani Doriaika. So I don't whichever one he says that way is correct. It's Doriaika. Yeah. I can always tell an audiobook listener because they don't spell Karn Sagura's name correctly. They spell it like Segura, like Tom Segura, not the Japanese way. So can always tell. D Site says, Christopher, question for you: how do you go about finding a literary agent? You email them. It's very much like applying for a job, and it is about as dismal. You can find their contact information all sorts of places. One place I used was a website called Query Tracker, QUERY tracker.net. I believe you have to make an account, but it was free in 2015. It may still be. And they have like a search engine that will let you search agents based on what they are looking for and stuff like that. But then you should read their requirements, because agents will ask for different things, and you should send them exactly what they're looking for. If they say they just want a letter, do not send them a sample. Because they are also looking to see if you are following instructions, because a lot of people just don't. They will send, romance novels to people who don't want to read romance, and that's not going to get you an agent, right? So just do what they say, follow the process. With one exception, if they say a non-answer is a no, a non-answer is not a no. A non-answer means they deleted your email and they did not read it. My recommendation is that you move their name to the bottom of your list and try them again in 6 months. Every 10 or so submissions, maybe change your title, change your pitch a little bit, maybe get rid of that prologue, because that prologue is probably holding you back. Maybe, do a little work on, chapter 1 if you're not getting any answers. Always be refining your pitch. Certainly change your letter. But if you change the title and rewrite your pitch, you can totally reapply to agents who ghosted you. I wouldn't reply to anybody that you got pretty far along with who then passed. Don't try with them again. But I say reply, retry. But if somebody doesn't answer you, just move to the bottom of your list. Don't bump them off. Have I thought about doing a Sunday art book? Yes, I certainly have. Certainly have. But there's no sense in doing one until I have the art finished, which will be a minute. So that's the tricky part. We'll see you later, Sam. See you later, Sam. Could there be any slower than light Murakami ships still out there? That's what the Archanaut is about. So, are the 2 art pieces in the background the Ark and the Tower of Babel? Can I ask why you picked those 2 pieces for your office workspace? I think about them a lot, but they are definitely that. It's the Ark and the Tower of Babel. Oops, I can't do the mirror thing. I'm very bad at it. I think about them a lot. They are both extinction events in a sense. One, an extinction event caused by nature. One, an extinction event caused by culture. Both of them ultimately caused by human failure. and I think about that a lot. So, man, I don't want to get this wrong. What are the complete ranks of solemn ability? You're broadly right. It's Archon up to, well, really up to Emperor, right? But I think it's, like, but I'm gonna miss things because, like, there are baronets, there just aren't, like, a lot, like, there tend to be more barons. Has been, the way it's shaken out, but it should be like baronet, baron, viscount, count, marquis, duke, grand duke, archduke, prince. Um, I think that's it. But there are also, like, localized weird exceptions, right? So, like, the the prince of House Yamato is the emperor in Nichibotsu, right, which is the like main Nipponese planet, right? So he has a special circumstance, right? And there are other weird cases like that. Let's see. When I outline my books, do I start with the end and work towards the beginning, or start the middle, beginning and work towards the end? When I'm outlining, I start at the beginning. When I'm sort of planning, I start with, like, a weird list of things I want to have happen, and I figure out what order they go in. And sometimes that means I have the ending. Like, when I started Demon and White, I knew where Demon and White ended, but I had no idea about the first 2/3 of the book, basically. And so I had to, like, figure all that out backwards. But I do that on, like, a bullet point system, or I'll have, like, index cards and I'll move them around and try to figure out what order they go in. That part is, like, very loose. And it's from there that I start asking those questions that build the outline. But when I'm writing the outline, I write it sequentially. I'm a very sequential writer. I don't skip around. I don't leave things unfinished, with a couple exceptions. And Elric books where he's trying to make a serious point are not as good as the ones where he wrote in a week to pay the bills. He's much better writing subconsciously. Many such cases. Many such cases. When I outline, do I outline the entire series, or do I create an outline for each book at a time? Each book at a time. I have, like, vaguer ideas about subsequent books, but why everyone so huge? I don't know. Seemed like the thing to do. Talking about, like, how everybody's really tall. Well, if you could, like, choose, like, you'd, like, probably choose to be taller, right? Not everybody is happy, being short. I am, because I don't hit my head on anything. But yeah. Same super chat. Man, nonsense. Thank you again for the second super chat. That's a question I don't really, like, want to address exactly, because no matter how I address it, it's either going to say too much or not enough, and there's not a good way to really deal with that question, because I just can't answer it. I'm sorry. But yeah. So satisfying to finally have an Empire of Silence hardcover. Thank you for the phenomenal series. Can't wait for the Diamond Edition. It's well worth it. Yeah, man, I am just so sorry about how late those things are. The good news is that we have the paper for book 2. So assuming I can get book 2 edited, that should happen pretty quickly. The real gating factor is going to be poor John with the interior art, because yeah, it's just, got a lot going on. Will I be doing any book tours in New England? I would love to have my first print of EOS signed. I would love to. I don't have. The only thing I have planned at the moment is going to Texas in September for a week. I am doing 2 events in Dallas with Ryan Cahill, and then I am going to go to Houston, and I'm going to go to Austin. I don't have the details of the rest of it yet. The only thing I have pinned down are the 2 events in Dallas, and have the dates and everything sort of clear soon. I, like, don't do a lot of stuff because I am not big enough for my publisher to, like, pay for me to do it. So any traveling I do is on my own recognizance and with my own money. Ryan invited me to come do an event with him in Texas. I don't think he knew how far that was from where I live. Europeans always make fun of Americans for not knowing geography, but then they don't know anything about America, which is funny. So I'm gonna fly down there myself, and then I figured while I was down there, I might as well do some stuff because know a bunch of people that are down there, so I figured I'd do a little circle. But as far as other things, I don't have any on the calendar just yet. Got another super chat here. Shout out to my friend Yossi. Thank you, Paul, for the $10. And shout out to Yossi. Having a programming presentation in 40 minutes. Wish me luck. Also, How in Dark is going so well right now. Well, thank you. Glad you're enjoying it. And good luck with the presentation, Mohammed. Might be a spoiler question, but do you think there are still primitive sea elves and chilling on the original homeworld? Probably not. Probably not. That's all I can say. Stanley, Elise here in the chat said she might be interested in the editing job there. What civilization do the Durantines come from? They are they're like Balkan Slavs. And like Venice. Those were the inspirations. Are there any ideas nagging at me for a fully fledged take in the fantasy genre? Not nagging, but like they exist. They exist. Any good recommendations for fantasy? I'm currently burnt out on Western fantasy, mostly read fantasy novels from China. I mean, not that you probably haven't already read. Like, I'm a big Guy Gabriel K fan, Tolkien. I don't read a lot anymore. Am I looking forward to my live chat with Ryan Cahill? Yeah, Ryan's the man. Ryan's the man. I like Ryan a lot. It'll be fun, and it'll be fun to like go do something and do events again. That's probably like the only thing I'm going to do this year, since I'm going to be away from home for like a week. It's not really fair. Not really fair to my wife. So, will the Sun Eater short stories be combined into a physical book instead of only being available in ebooks? Yes, that's always been the plan. They will be in one volume. The notion was so originally I wasn't going to do anything at all. It just was going to have these short stories in places. But people were asking me if I would put the short stories together so they didn't have to buy 5 and 6 different anthologies. So I said, sure, I'll do that. But I thought, hey, if I do that, at the time I only had 5 stories, I think 6 stories. I said, I'll write a new one and they'll make a little bundle, because if I tried to make a book with that, it was like shorter than the Lesser Devil was at the time. That was the only stuff I had. And I said, I don't want to put that out as like a real book because it doesn't feel right. And so I decided to make an ebook only, so that I could eventually put them all in one big book for everybody. And the thing was, this was supposed to be a 5-book series, so this was supposed to be over by now. And it's just, there are a lot more of you now than there were in 2019, 2020. And at the time, everybody like understood the program, because like everybody who noticed I had a self-published book was like literally on my newsletter. And now it's like a little confusing when it wasn't a while ago. But yes, there will be an omnibus of all the short stories that'll be out probably late next year, early 26. It'll be the first thing that happens after book 7 is done, because then it will have all the short stories that accompany the writing of all those books, and there will eventually be a second volume of all the short stories put together. So it'll be two books of all of them, and that'll be of all the stories that are in the special editions, because those stories are longer. So all the backup stories that are in the Diamond editions and the Narrative Books editions will eventually, way down the road, be in another volume after those special editions are all done. That'll be at the end of all the special edition projects. So I am pretty sure that Quail Ridge has Empire of Silence in hardcover, because I have to go sign like 50 of them this week. So they might all be spoken for, but they'll order more. DAW printed thousands of them this time. They got the memo. There's a copy. If just order one from Quail Ridge and they'll get you. It just won't be overnight. Should be just fine. Am I looking forward to the Elden Ring DLC? Oh, absolutely. It is apparently essentially the size of Dark Souls. So it is a whole game. I do not mind spending $40 on it. I'm very excited. I'm taking the weekend off. And there's not a thing any of you can do to stop me. How long did it take me to write Empire of Silence? I mean, I started writing and wanted to write a book when I was like 8, and I finished it when I was 20. But like realistically, about 3 years. I do in fact love Snow Crash. It's my favorite Neil Stephenson book. Does growing children of vats affect the characters' closeness to their children? Yeah, deeply. You may have noticed Liliana Kefalos Marlowe, not the best mom of all time, although she had one moment. But when you struggle with a scene, do you ever refer to similar scenes in books you admire? I try really hard not to do that, because that makes the copying thing worse. Did I see they're making an animated Lord of the Rings movie? Thoughts? I am super excited too. It's Kenji Kamiyama who did Standalone Complex, which is awesome. I think the art looks really great. I'm a little apprehensive about some of the liberties they're taking with source material, but it is kind of thinner source material, so you like kind of have to a certain extent. But we'll see how it goes. I feel pretty good about it. I like that it doesn't look like crap visually, which is something you can't say for most animation in 2024. So I'm cautiously optimistic. Is How the Dark getting a new run like EOS, or is that dependent on how EOS does? It is dependent on how EOS does. I don't have a definitive answer on that just yet. I saw a post online about authors hypothetically covering novels the way artists sometimes cover songs. Who would I pick for covering Sun Eater? And is there any Wolf series I would cover? I would cover. I mean, no, I wouldn't presume to mess with something like that seriously. I like very deeply am against the idea of like working in other people's universes at this point, and like I have no interest. I turned down like 4 or 5 offers now. One twice. I just I don't want to do it. As far as other people covering me, that's like also weird. It's like no, I don't know. It's an interesting thought experiment, but I don't think I'll speak to it. I'm sorry. Well, I miss Sun Eater when I'm done. Yeah, I think I will. But I think I will also feel a great relief, assuming everybody likes book 7. My great fear is that I'll just ruin the ending and nobody will like me anymore. Is there a plan for where the setting goes after book 7? Do I know roughly where the fallout is? And is there anything I could tease? There is nothing I could tease. But I think about the fallout on a daily basis. It is very important to book 7, what follows. So, are we ever going to get an elaboration on the story Edward mentions in Disquiet Gods about a pope and a sullen emperor? Probably not, but maybe. You never know. When I know I wanted to be a writer when I was like 8. Which IPs did I turn down? I'm not gonna say. It feels impolite. It's like kissing and telling. But yeah, no, the only thing I've ever said yes to was that Marvel comic. Because Steve McNiven asked, and if Steve McNiven asks, you do it. But it's funny. Don't worry about ruining the ending. People love Stephen King. That's awesome. What is my go-to build in a From Software game? It depends on the game. I historically have played like quality builds. But with Elden Ring, the magic was a lot more usable in a lot of ways. That may be a controversial opinion. I found it a lot easier to use the magic in Elden Ring than I did in Dark Souls. But like in Dark Souls 1, I was like a Claymore Boulder Shield guy. And I went through the whole game like that. Shields have basically been bad ever since Dark Souls 1, so I have since abandoned that. But I don't remember what I did in 2 or 3. I only played Dark Souls 3 once because it came out at a time when I was very busy. But as Zin is noting, I was a Moonveil Spellblade guy my first playthrough on Elden Ring. And I have no shame about that. The Moonveil is awesome, and it is great fun. And it is only lamos who have made it uncool. But I'm currently doing a Black Flame, like Pyromancer, bleed build. So that's fun. I'm gonna totally change it in the DLC though. I gotta play with the new stuff. Hey Daniel, what's up, man? Largest four-legged animal I'm comfortable having as a pet. A like axolotl. I am like not a pet guy. I'm like allergic to all that stuff. But maybe like really pushing it. I like the panda answer. My daughter would be delighted. That's her jam right now. Like every time she's a panda in a picture book, she says that, and she points at the panda and says that. I'm like, can't get you one. I'm sorry. But yeah, no. Yeah. I mean, horses are okay, but like not in the house, right? Which might be ideal for me in a lot of ways. I just need things to be neat. Cats are not conducive to that, so also make me very itchy. What would I say? Yes to start from software. Yeah, I'm yes, absolutely. 100%. I even like have a sense of like what I would do if I were in George's situation. But we'll see. That'd be very cool, but I don't think it'll ever happen. Am I looking forward to Dune Prophecy? I'm like not sure if I'll watch it. I got in trouble for this, but I like really like don't like Denis Villeneuve's vision of the Dune universe. It's just not. It's not the books to me. The cast is great. Costumes are great, but like just not. It's not right. It's not my Dune. And like when I said that last time, a lot of people were like, well, of course it's not your Dune. I'm like, yeah, I know, man. Like, okay, like what's your point? But yeah, no. So I don't know. I am interested because it's not exactly to look at the cast list. It's not exactly Brian or Brian Herbert or Kevin Anderson's Dune either. There's like characters that don't exist in those books that are in there. I'm very interested to see exactly what it is. But yeah, so we'll see. We'll see. Am I a fan of sushi? 100%, man. Absolutely. I would go broke eating it if I could justify it to myself. Alas, that I am responsible. On tax day, I did a conversation about self-publishing versus traditional. I couldn't watch it then. Is it available? Yeah, if you're talking about the stream with Jordan and Nicholas, it's here on the channel. Yeah, it should just be in the live tab because it was a live stream. But yeah, it's there. If I could have a video game based off of Sundeer, what kind of game would it be? That's a really good question. I mean, maybe it would be sort of in the style of like Witcher 3. Have like a big sort of sprawling like RPG. You have to be like this character, and I don't want to be like Skyrim is too open. Like you don't have a character in Skyrim. You have a person who clicks buttons. So I like Witcher better. So maybe something like that. But then like maybe an action game would be fun too. Maybe do something. Like do like a third-person shooter kind of thing. And like be a guy in the trenches. I think that'd be cool. I think that'd be cool. You never know. But or as the people on the Discord server said repeatedly, a gacha card game. With lots of microtransactions. That would be great. I'm kidding. For legal reasons, that was a joke. Did I miss any? Oh my gosh, have we reached the bottom of the chat? No, Isaac asked any movie recommendations, any genre, any decade. I feel like I've like talked about so many that I'm like gonna just play my greatest hits here. I watched what's it called? I watched Breaker Morant recently. It was a historical movie about a Australian mercenary during the Boer Wars who gets tried for war crimes, and that was really good. And that's the kind of movie they don't really like make anymore. Because it's like very old. It's like very old Hollywood. So that was cool. I think it's on Max is where I watched it. It's really good performances, but it's like an old movie, right? But Tiscaladin says, not Green Knight or Dune 2. So like that's one, but I haven't watched a lot lately. Like Dune 2 was literally the last movie I watched. It's been like that many months since I watched a movie. Like all of my like rare free time has been replaying Elden Ring in advance of the DLC. Like ever, obviously like my favorite movie of all time is Lawrence of Arabia. It's still great. And anyone who says differently is selling something. But like, I don't know. Everything else like is not going to surprise anybody. Like I love Ghost in the Shell is my favorite anime. The Oshi film is a masterpiece. I'm trying to think of like weird answers that will surprise people, but yeah. Anyway, I have not seen Furiosa yet. Plato or Aristotle? Aristotle is my boy. Any plans for the Hakurani? That was the open door they were talking about, and it's meant to keep you up at night. We'll see. We'll see. With the reunification of Catholics and Orthodoxy, are there any difference in government doctrine that evolved or different from the modern day? I've spent a weird amount of time thinking about this for the exactly zero amount of this that's shown up in the books. I don't, as far as governance goes, I don't really have a good answer yet because I really want to talk to some of my Orthodox friends and like come up with something that feels plausible to them. Because like I said, like I take religion in stories very seriously. Hope everybody's okay. But yeah, so I don't want to do it wrong. So yeah. Here's a question that I like really want to answer, and then I'll go back to Halkiov here. More Selene post as Quiet Gods. Yes, she's in book 7. I don't know why people think she's not. Don't know why people think she's not. She's in book 7. It'll be fine. I think. Apparently, people read that one paragraph is like her send off, and it's not. Read it again. She's around, I promise. Maybe I asked this before, but how do I think about or handle theme in your writing? A lot of writing teachers talk about theme. Is this a question you were prepping to get me in trouble, Corey? Look, you should like try to say something, right? But there are like different reasons to say something. You could say something because it's interesting. You could say something because you don't know the answer to it, right? You could say something because you think it's interesting. But like I try to, there's I can't remember who said this of Nietzsche, that he did philosophy with a hammer, right? He was banging ideas together to see what broke, right? And like fiction is 1000% the medium to play that game, right? Because ideas don't exist. We're getting back to the Plato and Aristotle question. They don't exist in this ideal abstract world that's like over here, right? It's not the question like what's more real, this pen or the number 3, right? That's a useless question, right? Because those ideas are incarnate in objects, the same way that your soul is incarnate in you, right? There's this Aristotelian like hylomorphic relationship between idea and thing, and in drama there's a relationship between the ideas and the characters and the forces in the story that those ideas represent, and then those you get to hit against each other. And so you should think about these things like really actively, and you should be trying to say something. But you shouldn't assume that you were right? Because one of the things that you can discover as you're telling a story is that the ideas you had as the author going in are wrong because the story doesn't work. I think this is fundamentally the issue that everybody has with the ending of the Game of Thrones show. That ending doesn't work. It's not true in the way we talk about fiction being true. It rubs people the wrong way. And if everybody who watches something says, that's a bad story, if we're all the kid in Princess Bride telling grandpa that he did it wrong, right? The story didn't work. And you can discover this in yourself as a writer if you're listening to yourself, to your conscience properly, as Socrates would have you do, right? You can realize, oh, I had a stupid idea because the story is breaking, right? And so the thing that might need to give in a story is you, right? And if you're thinking about what the story is and what it means, it might be easier to see that. And so I think about theme pretty actively as I'm writing, but it's also an emergent thing. I don't go in saying I'm going to write a story about X, right? Unless X is a character or a like random idea. Now you can start with theme. I usually don't. I don't come in and say, hey, I wanna tell a story about why killing is bad, right? That killing is bad, right, is an emergent feature of what the story is, right? Unless it's a story in which killing is, in this limited case, not bad, right? Like you discover those things along the way, and then once you realize that that's what the story is, what it's about, you can then in the rewrite make it more about that thing. I try not to lead with that. I try to lead with a person who is embodying these ideas, doesn't know it yet, right? If that makes sense. It's a very loopy answer, but um gonna go see Lawrence of Arabia at theaters in August. Never seen it before. Man, that's awesome. I would love to see it in theaters. It is so good. It's really long, so pack a lunch. But what happened with Church of England with the rise of the Chantry? The Church of England was long gone before the Chantry showed up. Prince of Egypt, the movie, awesome. It's great. It's great. I just didn't get a chance to go see Furiosa, which is a shame because I understand it did very poorly, and I would like George Miller to make more movies because he is a genius. Every Planet of the Apes is great. That is true, except the Tim Burton one. That one can die. Let's see. Is Sabine still alive during and after Disquiet Gods? Yes. She's in book 7. Did the experience of reading books change for you since you became an author? Yeah, I mostly just don't like doing it anymore. It feels like work. It feels like work, and so my this is the real things. People are like, oh, have you read X or Y? And I was like, oh, I'm not reading it when I'm working. I mostly am not reading because I don't want to read fiction anymore. It feels like my job. It's not relaxing the way it used to be. With a couple exceptions, it has to be really, really, really good to get me to have fun. And there are not a lot of books that have done that for me in the last couple of years. And that's okay. The reality is that I love writing so much that the loss of reading new books is not a great loss to me at all. Best advice I've heard for theme is don't be a preacher. Yeah, you don't want your audience to feel like you're just yelling at them about anything ever. That's not the game. To me, Hadrian seems to be evoking Tolkien-esque Eldar qualities in book 6. Was that intentional? No, that was an interesting comparison that I've seen a couple people make, but it wasn't an active thought. I've ever read any Terry Pratchett. I read a fraction of Good Omens, and I didn't like it, which is maybe not fair to him because Neil Gaiman is there, and I don't like Neil Gaiman. But no, I have not. I get the vague sense that that's not my sense of humor, and so I just have not. I have not really looked into any of his work ever. Also, there's too much Ringworld that intimidates me. Or not Ringworld, Discworld. Ringworld is Larry Niven, which I have read. But it's getting close to 10 o'clock, so I'm just going to start getting a little fuzzy here. What's up with the not needing sleep thing? I thought it would be cool. You also don't count the Burton one. Good, don't count the Burton one. We can just count the Burton Batman movies. Well, the first one, and that's enough. That's enough. It's enough Burton for one day. You'd think I would like him, but mostly no. Do I like any of the older EU books? So what are my favorites? My favorite Star Wars book ever is the novelization of Revenge of the Sith. I think it is a masterpiece. But I love the old Stackpole books. I love like X-Wing. Like those are great. Um, I love like the original Thrawn books. Those are awesome. Tim is a genius. Such a nice guy. Real pro. And I liked like the Kevin Anderson like Jedi Academy books when I was a kid. Big Tanel Ka crush when I was like 10. She's awesome. But there's a novelization of Revenge of the Sith. Yeah, man, dude, have you not read it? It's by Matthew Stover, who also wrote Shatterpoint, which is a great Star Wars novel about Mace Windu. It's basically Apocalypse Now, with Mace Windu as Marlowe and Deepa Balaba as Kurtz. Very, very good. But you should totally go read it. It's even better than the movie. How do I feel about people recommending my books to the Red Rising fandom? Definitely a lot different than that series. I'm glad you say different because for a long time people asked if I was just trying to copy Pierce Brown, which I have never read. So I feel great about it. They sound cool. I hope that people who like those books like mine, because there are a lot more of those, a lot more fans of Red Rising than there are of me. So it'd be great if people came on over. Thoughts on the Dresden Files? I read the first 3 and I really liked them. But I never finished for whatever reason. Jim Butcher is one of the few really big writers that I've met who is very generous to smaller writers and was very kind to me. Most of them, have stuff to do, but he went way out of his way to like say hi to all the new kids at the table, and that was really cool. I like Jim Butcher a lot, but I've never finished the series. And it is 10, so I'm gonna take a couple more because Elise is here reminding me that I need to go to bed because that's what she does. Thank you, Elise. So I'll take, let's do like 3 more questions, and then leave it there. Ray says, going through the Revenge of the Sith novelization via audiobook, it's so good. Yeah, it's Jonathan Davis, who also reads Book of the New Sun. It's great. It's so good. Audiobook is 100% the way to do it. That audiobook is so good. Any place to find a reading word for Star Wars, man? I'm sure there is, but I don't know. I actually don't see any more questions. Actually, I think so. We may just go wrap things up then, unless anybody wants to drop one real quick. I'll do a little update in the meantime. Yeah, so I mostly am caught up. I should be back to book 7 by the end of the month. I've got one more short story I need to write and one more intro. I'm working on the intro for the Derrida Books version of Empire of Silence. Once that's done, all the new material for all the special editions that I need to do right now will be done. I need to go edit Howling Dark for the Diamond Edition, but that's the last thing besides artwork that I need to worry about. We're almost done with all the art for Broken Binding. We're going to be revealing one Broken Binding art piece a week until we've revealed it all. On Friday, every Friday, we started doing that. It's previous Friday. Those should be on sale, I think, by the end of the summer is the plan. So it's all very, very cool. I saw Brendan ask my favorite and my least favorite Persian emperors. My favorite Persian emperor is probably Xerxes, who gets a really bad rap. Nothing wrong with that guy at all. And least favorite Cambyses because he sucks. It was like probably crazy, but like maybe not. Maybe that's not true. Maybe that's not. We don't know. But Cambyses didn't really amount to that much. Does the audiobook whine about hating sand? I don't remember the novelization of Attack of the Clones very well, but that was R.A. Salvatore who wrote that, and he isn't terrible. So I think that it's probably fine. All right, and last question: will we ever get an Emperor POE story or novella? Yes, at some point, 100%. But I think that will do it for now, ladies and gentlemen. Do I have a working title though for book 7? Great note to end on, Rogerio. It is Shadows Upon Time. It is 100% that. So then that'll be out sometime next year. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, Godspeed.